There are moments in life when the world decides you don't belong anymore. Not because of what you did, but because of what someone said you did. And in those moments, the truth doesn't matter nearly as much as the story people choose to believe. Raya knew this now. She counted the seconds to prove it. 1001, 1002. Just like her father taught her during battle training when she was 8 years old, standing in the mountain snow with wooden practice blades that felt heavier than iron. Count your breaths, Durak had said. Control the outcome. Stay calm when the world demands panic. 1017, 17 minutes. That's all it took to erase 24 years of loyalty, every scar she carried, every enemy she'd faced, every night she'd stood watch while her clan slept in the safety she provided. All of it dissolved by 3 words from her brother's mouth. She betrayed us. Theron didn't look at her when he said it. He looked instead at the scar on his left hand, the old wound shaped like a crescent moon. Raya still remembered the day he got it. They were children, 12 and 10. A training blade fell during practice. She pushed him aside, took the cut across her shoulder instead. The scar still lived there, right next to 14 others she'd earned protecting orcs, who now wanted her dead. Chief Kragar sat on the stone seat that had held clan leaders for 6 generations. His fingers played with the necklace of enemy tusks around his throat, the same gesture he made before every difficult decision. Except this time the decision didn't look difficult at all. His eyes had already made their judgment. The trial was theater. The ending had been written before she walked into this room. The humans found our supply route, Kragar said. His voice had the weight of boulders grinding together, glaciers carving through mountains. Someone told them where to wait. We lost 32 warriors in that ambush. I didn't, Raya started. Your brother saw you talking to a human scout 3 days before the attack. The words hung in the air like smoke. Raya looked at Theron, really looked at him, at the way he stood just slightly behind Kragar's seat, at the new markings on his armor, the kind warriors earned for exceptional service, at the fresh scar across his jaw that she didn't remember him having, at the promotion pins that gleamed like accusations. And she understood. Her brother had always been ambitious, had always stood in her shadow, the youngest sibling of the clan's best tracker, best fighter, the warrior their father had been so proud of before a human arrow found his throat 5 years ago. Theron was good, but good wasn't enough when your sister was great, and 32 dead orcs needed someone to blame. I was interrogating a prisoner, Raya said quietly, not pleading, not begging. Just stating a fact that no one wanted to hear. Following your orders to... He says you let the scout go. Kragar's eyes were the color of old iron, rust and rain. He says you whispered something before releasing him, something that sounded like directions. Her fingers found the bone talisman at her wrist, the one her father had carved, the one with his protection runes etched so deep they'd never wear away. She felt them now, those ancient symbols. Protection, strength, honor. But what good were runes against lies? I didn't betray the clan, she said. The words fell like stones into deep water. They made ripples, then disappeared. Kragar touched his tusk necklace one more time. The decision was made, had been made before she walked in. Maybe before the trial even started. Maybe the moment Theron whispered his poison in the chief's ear. The punishment for treason is death, Kragar said. But you are a daughter of Durak who died with honor. For his memory, I give you a different sentence. Raya's jaw clenched. Her father's last gift, his protection, his belief that she would always do the right thing. Exile. The word hit harder than any blade. You have until sunset to leave our territory. If any orc sees you after dark, they have the right to kill you without trial. You take only what you carry. No weapons, no food, no water. The wilderness will decide if you deserve to live. 17 minutes, 1017 seconds to lose everything. The wilderness, as it turned out, was not particularly interested in deciding anything. It was too busy being extremely effective at killing things. Raya made it 4 days. 4 days of walking through territories where orcs and humans had been killing each other for 3 generations. 4 days through the Olympic forest, that green cathedral of Douglas fir and western hemlock, where the trees grew so tall they blocked out the sky. Where moss covered everything like a second skin, where the ground was soft with centuries of rot and renewal. Day one, she crossed the Columbia River at dawn. The water ran fast and cold, fed by mountain snow that hadn't fully melted. She nearly drowned. Her orc strength meant nothing against a current that had been carving canyons for 10,000 years. She made it across only because her father had taught her to swim when she was 8, in the same breath as teaching her to count during battle. Stay calm. Control your breathing. The water doesn't care if you panic. She crawled onto the opposite bank with lungs burning and muscles screaming. Human territory now, enemy, land. But what did that mean when her own people wanted her dead? Day 2, she avoided a human patrol near Route 101. 6 soldiers in forest camouflage moving in formation, rifles ready. She smelled them before she saw them. Humans always smelled like metal and fear and the chemical soap they used to mask their scent. It never worked. Not against orc senses. She hid in a deadfall, a massive cedar that had collapsed decades ago and now housed an entire ecosystem of beetles and moss and small mammals. The soldiers passed within 10 feet. One of them stopped, looked directly at her hiding spot. Her breath caught in her throat. Her father's voice echoed, "Stay still. Predators see movement, not shadows." The soldier moved on. That night, she encountered wolves. A pack of 6, lean and hungry, in the way October wolves always were, preparing for winter. They circled her in a clearing where moonlight filtered through the canopy like silver water. The alpha stepped forward, yellow eyes, scarred muzzle, testing. Raya stood her ground. Orc combat training had taught her the language of predators. She made herself larger, bared her tusks, made the low rumbling sound deep in her chest that said, "I am not prey. I am a warrior. Choose differently." The wolves chose differently. Day 3, she tried to hunt. Orcs didn't fish with poles or use traps. They hunted with spears and nets, and the kind of coordinated strategy that turned prey into food with brutal efficiency. But Raya had no spear, no net, just her hands. Catching rabbits with bare hands turned out to be less warrior survival skill and more embarrassing way to starve. The rabbits were faster, smarter. They knew their forest in a way she didn't. By nightfall, she'd caught nothing. Her stomach had stopped growling and started aching. The kind of ache that said, "This is the beginning of the end." It rained that night. The kind of Pacific Northwest rain that soaked through everything. She found a cave, really just an overhang of rock that kept off the worst of it. She tried to sleep, failed. Every sound was a threat. Every shadow held enemies. She thought about her father, about the last words he'd spoken before the human arrow found him. A warrior who dies with honor lives forever in the clan's memory. But what about warriors who were erased, who were declared traitors and forgotten? Where did they live? Day 4 started wrong. She woke to pain, sharp, burning, her left shoulder. She looked down and saw the wound. 3 parallel scratches, deep and angry. When had that happened? The cougar. Yesterday, she'd been so focused on getting away she hadn't noticed the damage. Now the wounds were infected. Red lines spreading from the cuts like rivers on a map. Poison in her blood. The kind of poison that killed slowly, painfully. She had 2 choices: find a human settlement, beg for help, or die with her pride intact in the forest. The settlement was closer. A small logging town called Carson, smoke rising from chimneys. She could see it from the ridgeline, maybe a mile away, maybe salvation. But walking into a human town as an orc was suicide, especially now with 32 human soldiers dead from an ambush. They'd shoot first. Ask questions, never. Raya stood on that ridge for an hour, weighing survival against honor. Her father's voice in her head, "A warrior adapts or dies. But also, some deaths are more honorable than others." She chose the forest, not because she was brave, because she was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of choosing between bad options and worse ones. Tired of a world that punished mercy and rewarded betrayal. If she was going to die, at least she'd die on her own terms. She walked until she couldn't walk anymore. One moment she was moving forward, the next moment she was on her knees in a pile of dead leaves. Getting back up seemed like entirely too much work. Her shoulder throbbed, her vision blurred. The bone talisman pressed against fever-hot skin. "Sorry, Dad," she thought. "Looks like your protection has an expiration date." The forest smelled like wood smoke and approaching rain. Somewhere distant, an axe was chopping wood with the steady rhythm of someone who'd been doing it for years. Chop, pause, chop, pause. The sound of human civilization. The sound of people who belong somewhere. Raya closed her eyes. At least the leaves were soft. Marcus Cole had been chopping wood for 8 years. In those 8 years, he'd gotten pretty good at noticing when something in his forest was out of place. A broken branch that shouldn't be broken. Tracks that didn't belong to deer. The particular quality of silence that meant something large and predatory was nearby. Today, that something was an orc. He saw the green skin first, then the armor. Red leather and steel plates, the kind orc warriors wore to make humans think twice before engaging. Then the stillness. Not the stillness of rest, the stillness of someone who couldn't move anymore. Every instinct Marcus had learned in his 32 years told him to walk away, turn around, pretend he hadn't seen anything. Orcs and humans didn't help each other. They killed each other. That was the rule. That was how the world worked. That's how everyone Marcus had ever known ended up dead. He stood there for 3 full minutes, axe in hand, looking at a problem that wasn't his problem and didn't need to become his problem. The orc wasn't moving, wasn't breathing visibly, might already be dead, which would make this much simpler. Except then he saw her hand, saw the way her fingers were curled around something on her wrist, saw the slight tremor that meant she was alive and fighting very hard to stay that way. Marcus had spent 8 years in these woods specifically to avoid making decisions about other people's lives. He walked toward the orc anyway. Up close, she looked young, younger than he'd expected. Orcs always looked massive and terrifying from a distance, all muscle and tusks and the kind of presence that made sensible people reconsider their life choices. But this one looked exhausted, like she'd been running for days and her body had simply quit. No weapons, no pack, nothing except the armor and whatever she was clutching on her wrist. Exiled. Marcus had seen it before, years ago when he still lived in a village and still cared about human affairs. Exile was the punishment you gave when death was too merciful and forgiveness was impossible. He should leave her. Walk away, let nature handle what politics had started. He knelt instead, checked her pulse, weak but steady, saw the infection spreading from the shoulder wound, saw the bone talisman on her wrist carved with symbols he didn't understand but recognized anyway. The kind of symbols fathers carved for daughters. The kind daughters carried even when everything else was lost. Linnea had carved something similar once, for their daughter. A wooden charm with protective symbols that Ren wore every day until the day she died. Marcus still had it, in a box, under his bed, where he didn't have to look at it but knew it was there. This orc's charm looked different, bone instead of wood, orc symbols instead of human. But the meaning was the same. The love was the same. Marcus made a decision, probably the stupidest decision he'd made in 8 years, maybe in his entire life. He picked her up. She was heavier than as she looked. Orcs were dense, more muscle, thicker bones, built for a world that demanded strength. He carried her anyway, back through the forest to his cabin, past the woodpile he'd been working on, past the garden where he grew potatoes and carrots and herbs that kept him fed through winter, past the markers that said, "This is my space, my sanctuary, my escape from a world that takes everything." He kicked open the cabin door, carried the orc inside, laid her on his bed, the only bed, the one he'd built with his own hands 8 years ago. When he first decided that solitude was better than the alternative. The infection was bad, worse up close. He'd need to clean it, stitch it maybe, hope she survived the night. Marcus looked at his rifle hanging on the wall, within easy reach if this turned out to be the stupidest decision after all. Then he looked at the orc, at her hand still gripping that bone charm, at the way her jaw was clenched even in unconsciousness, like she was fighting battles in her sleep. "Damn it," Marcus said to the empty room, to the ghost of his wife, to the memory of his daughter who'd asked him once why humans and orcs had to fight. "Because we always have," he'd told her. She'd said that was dumb, said someone should just stop. She was 6 years old, and she was smarter than all of them. Marcus got the medical supplies, started cleaning the wound, started making a decision he couldn't unmake. The orc stayed unconscious. Her breathing steadied as the hours passed, as the infection began to lose its grip, as night fell and the forest outside grew dark and quiet. Marcus sat in the chair by the door, rifle across his lap, just in case, watching an enemy sleep in his bed, wondering what Linnea would say, wondering what Ren would think. Probably that he was doing the right thing, even if it felt completely wrong. The first night Marcus didn't sleep. He kept watch, changed the bandages twice. The infection fought back. The orc's fever spiked around midnight. She thrashed, spoke words in the old tongue that Marcus didn't understand but recognized as names. People she'd lost, or people who'd betrayed her. Hard to tell which hurt more. He cooled her forehead with wet cloth, forced water between her lips. Did the things Linnea had done when Ren got sick. The things that hadn't been enough 8 years ago but might be enough now. By dawn, the fever broke. The orc's breathing evened out. Her color improved from gray-green to something closer to healthy. Marcus finally allowed himself to close his eyes, just for a moment. He woke to find her watching him. Raya woke up in a place that made no sense. Wooden walls, human-built, a fireplace with actual fire, a bed that wasn't dirt, and most confusingly, she wasn't dead. She sat up too fast, immediately regretted it as the room spun sideways and her shoulders screamed in protest. Easy. The voice was human, male, speaking in the kind of quiet tone you'd use with an injured animal that might bite. Her hand instinctively moved to her wrist. The bone talisman was still there. So was her armor, though someone had loosened the straps. No weapons within reach. But then again, she hadn't had weapons in days. The human sat across the room near the door. Strategic positioning. Close enough to react if she attacked. Far enough to run if she turned out to be faster than he expected. He was holding a rifle. Not pointing it, just holding it. The message was clear. You collapsed in the forest, the human said. 3 days ago. You've been mostly unconscious since then. 3 days. Raya tried to process that. Tried to figure out why a human would keep an orc alive for 3 days instead of just killing her while she slept. Why? Her voice came out rougher than she'd intended, probably from the whole nearly dying of dehydration thing. The human shrugged. Seemed rude to let you die in my forest. Your forest. I live here, have for 8 years, makes it mine by squatters' rights. Raya stared at him. He looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who'd lived alone in the woods for 8 years. Weathered skin that had seen too many winters. Practical clothes worn soft with use. Approximately 30% beard. He wore the kind of simple flannel and canvas that humans use for manual labor. No armor, no military insignia, just a man who'd apparently decided civilization wasn't worth the trouble. You should have killed me, Raya said. Probably, the human agreed. But I'm not particularly good at should. He stood, set the rifle against the wall but kept it within reach. Walked to a small table and picked up a bowl. Soup. Real soup with actual pieces of meat floating in it. You need to eat, he said. Then you need to decide what happens next. But first eat. He set the bowl on a small table between them. Close enough for her to reach. Far enough that he wasn't crowding her space. Then he went back to his position by the door. Giving her room, not watching her like she was some curiosity, just existing in the same space, adding wood to the fire, doing human things. Raya looked at the soup, at the human, at the small cabin that shouldn't exist and definitely shouldn't contain a living orc. The human was already back by the fire adding a log adjusting the coals. Acting like feeding exiled enemies was completely normal behavior. Raya picked up the bowl. The soup was good, which given everything else that had happened in the past week was somehow the most surprising thing of all. They didn't talk much that first day, mostly because Raya slept through 16 hours of it and Marcus spent the other 8 chopping wood and pretending this was a completely normal situation. The second day involved more consciousness and significantly more awkwardness. I should go, Raya said. She was sitting up now, looking stronger, but still too weak to actually go anywhere. Her legs shook when she tried to stand. Her shoulders still felt like someone had poured hot coals under her skin. Where? Marcus asked. He was repairing an axe handle near the window, not looking at her directly, giving her space to be proud. Anywhere that isn't here. Here being a human's home, where she didn't belong, where her presence put both of them in danger if anyone found out. Marcus tested the axe handle's repair, gripped it, swung it gently, nodded with satisfaction. "You're exiled," he said. "Matter of fact, no judgment. I'm guessing that means your clan wants you dead, and humans definitely want you dead. So anywhere is a pretty limited list." "Why do you care?" "Don't particularly," Marcus said, which was a lie, but a convenient one. "But I didn't spend 3 days keeping you alive just to watch you walk out and collapse again 20 feet from my door. Bad for my reputation." "You live alone in the woods. What reputation?" "Exactly my point. Only reputation I have is with the local deer, and I'd prefer they think I'm consistent. Despite everything, despite the exile, despite the betrayal, despite the fact that she was having this conversation with a human who should be her enemy." Raya almost smiled. Almost. The days that followed developed a pattern. Marcus would leave in the mornings to check his traps and cut firewood. Raya would stay in the cabin, too weak to do much, but strong enough to feel useless. When he returned, he'd bring whatever he'd caught, usually rabbits, sometimes fish from the stream, and they'd eat in a silence that was becoming less uncomfortable and more companionable. On the 5th day, Raya stood without the room spinning. Small victory. She walked to the door and back without needing to rest. Smaller victory still, but progress nonetheless. On the 6th day, she noticed the wooden figures. They were everywhere once you started looking. On shelves, on the windowsill, tucked into corners. Animals mostly. Deer, birds, a surprisingly detailed bear, all carved with the kind of patience that came from having nothing but time. "You made these?" Raya asked, picking up a wooden owl. Marcus glanced up from the rabbit stew he was stirring. "Gives me something to do with my hands." "They're good." "They're adequate," Marcus corrected. "Good would imply I had actual talent. These are just what happens when someone too stubborn to be bored carves the same owl 17 times until it stops looking like a potato." Raya ran her thumb over the owl's carved feathers, each one distinct, individual, the work of someone who cared about details no one else would see. "Why do you live out here?" she asked. "Alone." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that meant the answer was complicated and probably painful. "Because everyone I ever cared about died in a war that didn't need to happen," he finally said. "And I got tired of watching people kill each other over territory that doesn't belong to anyone." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Why were you exiled?" Fair question. She'd asked about his past. Only right that he ask about hers. "Because my brother needed a scapegoat," Raya said. "And I was convenient." "For what?" 32 orcs died in a human ambush. Someone had to be blamed. I talked to a human prisoner 3 days before it happened. So clearly I was a traitor. "Were you a?" "No." Marcus nodded once, like he believed her, like it was that simple. He turned back to the stew, stirred it slowly. The steam rose and curled and disappeared. "My village was destroyed by orcs when I was 24, he said, voice steady, factual, like he was describing the weather. "Wasn't even a planned raid, just a war party passing through that decided a human settlement was an easy target. They killed everyone. My wife, my daughter. Burned every building except the mill, and that only survived because it was made of stone." Raya went very still, her fist clenched at her side. "I'm supposed to hate your kind," Marcus continued. "Same way you're probably supposed to hate mine. Seems like that's what we're all supposed to do. Keep hating until everyone's dead or tired." He finally looked up from the stew. "But my daughter was 6. She didn't hate anyone. And the orcs who killed her probably had their own reasons. Their own dead children. Their own villages that burned. And somewhere in all of that, someone has to stop. Someone has to be the idiot who says, 'Not me, not anymore.'" He ladled stew into 2 bowls. "So here I am, 8 years later, giving soup to an orc, being that idiot." Raya's hand found the talisman at her wrist, felt the runes her father had carved, thought about all the humans she'd killed following orders, all the humans who'd killed orcs following their orders. The endless cycle of revenge that didn't solve anything but kept going anyway because stopping felt like admitting the dead had died for nothing. "Your daughter," Raya said quietly. "What was her name?" "Ren." "My father was Durak. He died fighting humans 5 years ago." They sat in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, the kind that happens when two people realize they're carrying the same weight. Different loads, same shoulders. The stew's getting cold, Marcus finally said. They ate. It was still good. 1 week became 2. Neither of them planned it. It just happened the way morning becomes afternoon, becomes evening. The way seasons change without anyone deciding they should. Raya's strength came back slowly. First she could sit up without the room spinning. Then she could stand. Then she could walk to the door and back without needing to rest. By the end of the 3rd week, she could make it to the edge of the clearing before her legs reminded her that recovery took time. Marcus chopped wood, fixed things around the cabin, cooked meals that were surprisingly edible for someone who'd been living alone for 8 years. He moved around the space like someone who'd forgotten other people existed and was slowly remembering how to share a room. On the morning of the 4th week, Raya watched Marcus prepare to leave for his trap line. He moved with the kind of efficiency that came from repetition. Rifle, knife, collecting bag, water canteen, the same pattern every morning. Teach me, she said. Marcus stopped, looked at her. Teach you what? To survive here the human way. He studied her face, looking for something, maybe weakness, maybe pride. Why, wow? Because orc ways failed me. Direct, honest, no shame in admitting it. I need new tools. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Get your boots on. We're burning daylight. The forest in late autumn was a different world than the one Raya had collapsed in weeks before. The leaves had turned from fire to rust. The morning air had teeth now. Frost on the ground that crunched underfoot. Marcus moved through it like water, reading the landscape in a language Raya was just beginning to understand. Orcs track by scent, Marcus said. Not a question, a statement. Mostly, Raya confirmed, in broken branches, disturbed ground. Humans can't smell worth a damn, Marcus said. So we read everything else. He knelt by a patch of soft earth, pointed to marks Raya would have walked past. Deer, doe, came through here maybe 4 hours ago. See how the edges of the track are still sharp. Rain hasn't softened them yet. And the way the leaves are pushed aside. She was moving slow, grazing, not running. Raya knelt beside him, looked where he pointed, started seeing patterns she'd missed before. It wasn't just about the tracks, it was about the story around them, the way grass bent, the direction of displaced soil. The deer had been here, had stopped to eat, had moved on toward water. Show me another, she said. They spent the morning that way, Marcus pointing out signs, Raya learning to see the forest the way humans did. When orcs hunted, they used overwhelming force, numbers, strategy, but humans hunted alone, or in small groups. They had to be smarter, more patient. By midday, they reached Marcus's trap line. 6 snares set along the game trails. 4 were empty, 1 had caught a rabbit. The last had been disturbed but empty. Raccoon, Marcus said, examining the sprung trap. Stole the bait, too smart for their own good. He reset the trap with practiced hands. Raya watched every movement, the way he positioned the trigger, the angle of the snare, the careful placement that looked random, but wasn't. Your turn, Marcus said at the next trap. Raya's first attempt was clumsy. Her orc hands were built for weapons, not delicate mechanisms. The trigger kept springing too early. Marcus didn't correct her, just watched. Let her figure it out. On the 5th try, she got it right. The trap sat ready, invisible to anything that didn't know to look for it. Better, Marcus said. That was all, just better. But coming from him, it meant something. They walked back to the cabin as the sun started its decline. The rabbit would make a good stew. Marcus showed her how to clean it, how to save the hide for later use. Nothing wasted, everything with purpose. Tomorrow, Marcus said as they worked, I'll teach you to fish. I know how to fish, Raya said. Orcs use nets or spears. Then tomorrow I'll teach you patience. The next morning they walked to the stream that ran a 1/4 mile from the cabin. The water was clear and cold, running fast over smooth stones. Marcus handed Raya a fishing rod. She'd seen humans use them before. Never understood the point. Why not just spear them, she asked. Because spearing takes strength. This takes skill. Marcus baited the hook, showed her how to cast. The line sailed out, landed in a pool where the current slowed. Now we wait. Waiting turned out to be harder than fighting. Raya's muscles wanted to move, to act, to do something other than stand still holding a stick. Orcs don't wait, she said after 10 minutes of nothing. I noticed, Marcus replied. He hadn't moved. His line still sat in the same pool. Probably why you're always starting wars. We don't start them, humans do. Everyone says that. Everyone's always defending. Funny how that works. Another 5 minutes of silence. Then Raya's line jerked. Instinct took over. She pulled hard. Too hard. The line snapped. The fish was gone. Patience, Marcus said again. Not mocking, just stating fact. The fish isn't your enemy. It's not something you conquer. It's something you persuade. He reeled in his own line. A trout, maybe a pound. He showed her how he'd let the fish tire itself out, how he'd worked with the current instead of against it. They fished until noon. Raya caught nothing. But she learned that not everything required force, that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was wait. Let the world come to you instead of charging at it. On the walk back, Marcus said, "You're thinking too loud." How do you think quietly? Practice, lots of practice. That evening, Raya asked about the wooden figures again. Marcus was carving a new one, a crow this time. His hands moved with the same patience he'd shown fishing. Can I try? She asked. Marcus looked surprised, but he handed her a small block of pine and a knife. Don't cut yourself. I'm low on bandages. Raya had carved before. Orcs carved weapons, tools, practical things. But she'd watched her father carve the bone talisman, watched him turn something ordinary into something sacred. That took different skills, different thinking. She started with something simple. A bird, not any specific bird, just the idea of one. Freedom, flight, the thing she'd lost when Theron spoke his lies. The knife slipped, cut her thumb, not deep, just enough to bleed. Marcus didn't say I told you so, just handed her a cloth, went back to his crow. Raya tried again, slower this time. The wood resisted, then yielded. Slowly over the course of 2 hours, a shape emerged, rough, imperfect, but recognizable. Not bad, Marcus said when she showed him. For a first try. Raya looked at the bird in her hand. It wasn't beautiful, but it was hers, made by her hands, not given, not inherited, created. Can I keep it? She asked. It's yours. Do what you want. Raya placed the wooden bird on the shelf next to Marcus's deer. 2 different species, 2 different carvers, sitting together like it was the most natural thing in the world. That night, for the first time since the exile, Raya slept without nightmares. The cart arrived on the first day of December. Raya heard it before she saw it. The familiar sound of wooden wheels on a forest path, the jingle of harness bells. She moved instinctively to the window. Away from direct line of sight, old habits from a lifetime of war. Marcus opened the door like this was completely expected. Monthly supplies, he said to Raya without turning around. Stay inside, let me handle it. If it's humans, it's one human, and she's safe. The cart stopped outside. Raya heard a woman's voice. Cheerful, practical. The kind of voice that had haggled at 1,000 markets and won most of the arguments. Marcus Cole, good to see you're still alive. I brought the usual plus extra flour because I know you go through it like... The voice stopped. Raya risked a glance through the window. A woman stood by the cart. Mid-30s, practical traveling clothes. Weather-beaten face that had seen hard miles and harder winters. She was staring directly at the window. Directly at Raya. There was a very long pause. Marcus, the woman said carefully, why is there an orc in your cabin? Long story. I have time. She was dying in my forest. Seemed rude to let that continue. Another pause. Raya could see the woman thinking, processing, making calculations that involve survival and risk and probably a fair amount of disbelief. She's exiled, Marcus added. No clan, no weapons, not dangerous. All orcs are dangerous, the woman said, but she didn't reach for a weapon, didn't run, just kept staring. Raya made a decision. She stepped away from the window, opened the door, walked outside into full view. Let this woman see her clearly. See the lack of weapons. See the exhaustion that still lived in her bones despite weeks of recovery. See that she was choosing to show herself rather than hide. I'll leave, Raya said, if my being here causes problems for him. The woman looked between them, at Marcus, who stood calm and unbothered, at Raya, who stood ready to walk back into the wilderness if necessary. How long has she been here? The woman asked Marcus. Almost a month. And you're both still alive. Surprisingly, the woman let out a long breath. Then she started unloading supplies from her cart. I need to add extra food to my monthly delivery, she said. Orcs eat a lot, I assume. Probably, Marcus agreed. This is insane. Probably. The woman handed Marcus a sack of flour. Then she looked at Raya, really looked at her. The kind of look that measured worth. I'm Meredith, she said. I've known Marcus for 4 years. He's the most stubborn man in 3 territories. If he's decided you're worth feeding, then arguing won't change anything. She pulled a thick wool blanket from the cart, walked over to Raya, handed it directly to her. Winter comes fast here, Meredith said. You'll need this. Raya took the blanket. It was the first gift anyone had given her since the exile. Her throat tightened. Words felt suddenly difficult. Thank you, she managed. Meredith nodded once, started unloading the rest of the supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, dried beans, sugar, all the things that made winter survivable instead of just endurable. You want payment for the extra? Marcus asked. Do you have payment? Not really. Then we'll call it charity. Meredith paused, looked at Raya again. Actually, you know orc medicine? Raya blinked at the sudden shift. Some. Why? Because I travel these roads year-round, see a lot of injuries, infections, things human medicine doesn't always fix. If you can make orc remedies, I can sell them. We split the profit, 50-50. It wasn't charity, it was business. Raya felt something in her chest loosen, a weight she'd been carrying without realizing it. I can make poultices, fever treatments, pain medicine from willow bark and other herbs. Good. Show me what you need. I'll bring supplies next month. They spent the next hour talking medicine. Meredith had a notebook, wrote down everything Raya told her, asked questions that showed she understood more about healing than most soldiers Raya had known. Before she left, Meredith pulled Marcus aside. Raya didn't try to listen, but sound carried in cold air. You know what you're doing? Meredith asked quietly. Not even a little bit, Marcus replied. Your wife, your daughter. They died because of orcs. They died because of war. There's a difference. Silence, then Meredith's voice softer. David died at Carson too. Same raid that killed your family. I know. And I'm standing here doing business with an orc. What would he think? Probably that we're both crazy, Marcus said. But he'd also understand. We've all lost enough Mir. Maybe it's time to stop adding to the pile. When Meredith drove away, she looked back once, raised her hand, not quite a wave, more like an acknowledgement. Raya raised her hand in return. She lost someone, Raya asked after the cart disappeared. Husband. Same raid that killed Ren and Linnea. Orcs burned Carson 8 years ago. Took a lot of good people. Raya's jaw tightened. My father led raids. Maybe even that one. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe it was some other orc following some other chief's orders. Doesn't really matter now. The dead are dead. We're the ones still here. He picked up the supplies, started carrying them inside. You coming or you planning to stand out here until you freeze? Raya followed him inside. The cabin felt warmer somehow. Not from the fire, from something else. Something harder to name. Winter came with a vengeance that year. The first real snow fell in mid-December. Not the light dusting of early winter, but the heavy, wet snow that accumulated fast and made everything quiet. Raya stood outside the cabin, watching it fall. She'd seen snow before. Orcs didn't melt in winter, but she'd never seen it like this. Peaceful, gentle. Not the brutal cold of mountain territories where warriors trained, but the soft cold of a forest settling in for rest. She held out her hand, caught snowflakes, watched them melt against her green skin. You'll freeze, Marcus said from the doorway. Orcs don't freeze easy. Still cold, though. He handed her a carved wooden cup. Tea. Something herbal that Meredith had included in the last delivery. They stood side by side, drinking tea, watching snow accumulate on bare tree branches. I've been thinking, Raya said quietly. dangerous pastime. I can't stay here forever. Marcus was silent for a moment. Snow collected on his shoulders, on his beard, made him look older and younger at the same time. I know, he finally said. Your human neighbors will eventually find out. Or my clan will track me down. Or something else will happen. This isn't sustainable. Probably not. But you're not asking me to leave. Marcus looked at the snow, at the forest, at the small world they'd carved out together in the spaces between wars. 8 years ago, I left my village because I couldn't stand watching people die for causes that didn't matter, he said. I came here to stop caring, to stop getting involved, to just exist without the weight of other people's wars. He turned to look at her. But then you collapsed in my forest, and I had a choice. I could follow the rules, let you die, avoid complications, keep existing in my comfortable isolation. Or I could break the rules and remember what it felt like to care about someone who wasn't supposed to matter. He looked back at the snow. I'm not asking you to leave because I don't want you to leave. And if that makes me a fool, then I'm a fool. But I've spent 8 years being smart and safe and alone. I'm tired of it. Her fingers brushed the talisman at her wrist, the runes pressed against her skin. My father used to say that warriors choose their battles, she said. But the bravest warriors are the ones who choose which fights to walk away from. Wise orc. He died in one of those fights he should have walked away from. Sorry. Me too. They stood in silence. Snow continued falling. The forest was so quiet you could hear individual flakes landing on leaves. That night, Raya dreamed. Not the usual dreams of the trial, of Theron's lies, of Chief Kregar's judgment. This dream was different. More memory than nightmare. She was back at the border camp. 3 days before the ambush. The human prisoner knelt before her, just a boy, 14 at most, scared out of his mind. Please, he'd said, I was just hunting. I didn't know this was orc territory. Please don't kill me. Raya had looked at him, seen her cousin, dead at 14, human arrow through his throat. This boy could have been the one who shot it, or he could have been innocent. No way to know. Go, she'd said. Run home to your mother and don't cross this border again. The boy had run. She'd let him go, mercy over duty, compassion over orders. But in the dream, the scene continued. After the boy left, Raya saw movement in the shadows, saw someone watching, someone who had seen everything. Theron. Her brother stepped from the trees, looked at where the boy had disappeared, then looked at Raya with an expression she couldn't read. Not anger, something else, something calculating. 3 days later, the ambush happened. 32 orcs dead. In the dream, Raya saw more. Saw Theron meeting someone, a human scout, money changing hands, information traded. Her brother's face in the firelight twisted with ambition and jealousy and something darker. Raya woke gasping, heart pounding. The cabin was dark. The fire had burned down to embers. She could hear Marcus breathing in his bedroll across the room, steady, peaceful, alive. She sat up. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, the counting rhythm, the way he'd taught her to find calm in chaos. Bad dream. Marcus's voice came from the darkness. Memory, maybe, I don't know. She heard him moving, saw him add wood to the fire. The flames grew, cast dancing shadows on the walls. You want to talk about it? He asked. I think my brother did more than lie at the trial, Raya said slowly. I think he caused the ambush, sold information to humans, killed his own warriors, then blamed me to cover his tracks. Marcus was quiet, feeding the fire, letting her talk. The prisoner I released. Theron saw it, saw me show mercy, and he used it, twisted it into treason. Even if that's true, Marcus said carefully, what can you do about it? Nothing. The word tasted bitter. I'm exiled, dead to my clan. Even if I had proof, who would believe me? Theron's a hero now. Chief Kregar's favorite. And I'm the traitor who got 32 warriors killed. She looked at the fire, at the wooden bird she had carved sitting on the shelf next to Marcus's deer. But I know the truth now. That has to count for something. It counts forever with the... Marcus said. Truth always does, even when no one else can hear it. They sat by the fire until dawn, not talking, just being. Two people carrying truths too heavy for one person alone. January arrived with bitter cold and shorter days. Marcus had been working on expanding the woodshed. The roof needed reinforcement before the next heavy snow. He'd been at it for 3 days, measuring boards, cutting angles, working with the methodical patience that defined everything he did. On the fourth day, Raya heard the crack. She was inside grinding herbs for the next batch of medicine for Meredith. The sound cut through the winter air like a gunshot. Then a crash. Then silence. Raya dropped everything. Ran outside. Marcus lay pinned beneath a fallen branch. Not the one he had been working on. A dead cedar limb from above, weakened by ice that had chosen that exact moment to give way. The branch was massive, easily 300 pounds. It had caught him across the shoulder and upper chest, driving him to the ground. He wasn't moving. Raya's training kicked in. She assessed the situation in seconds. The branch was too heavy for a human to lift. But she wasn't human. She grabbed the branch, found the balance point, used her legs, her back, every ounce of orc strength she possessed. The branch lifted, inch by inch. Just enough. "Move," she commanded. Marcus didn't respond, unconscious or in shock. She couldn't tell which. Raya shifted her grip, held the branch with one hand, used the other to grab Marcus's coat, dragged him clear, let the branch fall. She knelt beside him, checked for breathing, weak but steady, checked for broken bones. His left shoulder was dislocated, ribs possibly cracked, a gash across his forehead bleeding freely. Raya had seen these injuries before, on battlefields, in training accidents. She knew what to do. She got him inside, onto his bed, started with the shoulder. Orc field medicine was brutal but effective. She braced her knee against his chest, gripped his arm, pulled hard and fast. The shoulder popped back into place with a sound that made her teeth ache. Marcus screamed, came back to consciousness with a gasp. "Easy," Raya said, using the same tone he'd used on her weeks ago. "You're inside. You're safe." "What?" Marcus tried to sit up. Raya held him down. "Dead branch fell. Pinned you. I got you out. Your shoulder was dislocated. I reset it. Ribs might be cracked. And you're getting stitches for that head wound, whether you like it or not." She worked quickly, cleaned the wound, stitched it with the same thread Marcus had used on her shoulder. Her hands were steady. This she knew how to do. Warriors learned field medicine young. You either learn to save your friends or you watch them die. By the time she finished, Marcus's face had gone gray, pain and shock catching up with him. "You need to stay down," Raya said, "for at least 2 days, maybe 3. I'll handle the fire, the food, everything else. The woodshed can wait." Marcus tried to argue, failed, passed out instead. Raya spent that night the way Marcus had spent her first night, keeping watch, changing bandages, monitoring for fever. Around midnight, Marcus's temperature spiked. She'd expected this, brought cool water, wet cloth, did the things he'd done for her. "Ren," Marcus muttered in his fever. "Linnea, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Raya kept working, kept cooling his forehead, kept him alive. By dawn, the fever broke. Marcus's breathing evened out. His color improved. He'd survive. Raya sat in the chair by the fire, exhausted, but satisfied. When Marcus woke hours later, he found her asleep in the chair, his rifle across her lap, keeping watch. He smiled despite the pain. Fair was fair. When Marcus was finally able to sit up without looking like death 3 days later, he found Raya in the kitchen area. She'd made soup, something with rabbit and the herbs she'd been saving for medicine. It smelled good. "You could have left," Marcus said. Raya didn't look up from the pot. "Where would I go into January snow? I'd last maybe 2 days." "That's not why you stayed." She finally met his eyes. "No, it's not." "Why then, my eyes?" Raya set down the ladle, thought about how to put it into words. "You saved me when you had every reason to let me die, when your own family was killed by orcs, when helping me put you in danger." She paused. "I couldn't leave you under that branch. Couldn't walk away. Not after everything." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding more than what she'd said. "We're even now. The debt's paid." "Is that what you think this is?" Raya asked. "A debt, isn't it?" She thought about the past 2 months, about learning to fish, about carving wooden birds, about standing in the snow drinking tea, about this man who'd given up on people deciding she was worth the trouble anyway. No, she said finally, it's not. Marcus smiled, winced as the motion pulled at his ribs. Good, because I'd hate to think you only saved me out of obligation. I saved you because your Raya stopped, searched for the right word in the human tongue, couldn't find it, settled for something simpler. Because you're Marcus. That's enough. They ate soup in comfortable silence. Outside, the January cold pressed against the walls, but inside, something warmer than fire kept the darkness at bay. February came cold and bright. The snow had settled into that hard-packed consistency that made walking easier, but winters longer. Marcus had mostly recovered. His shoulder still bothered him in the mornings, and the ribs were healing slowly, but he was back to checking traps and chopping wood. Moving more carefully now, looking up more often. He'd gone to check the northern trap line, the one that took most of the day to reach and return from. Raya stayed at the cabin, worked on a new batch of medicine for Meredith's next visit. Ground herbs with a mortar and pestle Marcus had found buried in a shed. She heard the vehicles before she saw them. Motors, multiple, coming fast. Rangers, had to be. Forest Service or maybe military. Either way, not good. Raya moved quickly, grabbed her few belongings, the bone talisman, the wooden bird, a spare set of clothes. There was a root cellar beneath the cabin. Marcus had shown it to her weeks ago, for emergencies. This qualified. She was halfway down the ladder when she stopped. Thought about Marcus, about what would happen if they found evidence of an orc. They'd arrest him, maybe kill him. The penalty for harboring an enemy was death in some territories. Raya climbed back up, erased her presence as much as possible, put away the extra bowl, the spare blanket, hid the medicine supplies, made the cabin look like only one person lived here. Then she went outside, into the forest, not the cellar. If they searched and found it, Marcus would be implicated. But if they found tracks leading away, they might assume he'd driven off a trespasser. She climbed a large cedar, 40 feet up, into the branches that still held enough needles to hide her. From there she could see the cabin, could see Marcus when he returned, could warn him if needed. 3 forest rangers arrived in 2 trucks. They parked outside, knocked on the door. No answer. They waited, looked around, started a perimeter search. Raya held perfectly still, controlled her breathing, became part of the tree. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged from the forest, rifle over his shoulder, 2 rabbits tied to his belt. He saw the trucks. His pace didn't change, didn't speed up, didn't slow down. Just walked to his cabin like finding rangers there was mildly inconvenient. "Help you, gentlemen," he called out. The lead ranger was young, maybe 25. Official uniform, official attitude. Marcus Cole. "That's me. We're conducting searches for a rogue orc. Reports of tracks in this area. You seen anything unusual?" "Just the usual deer and rabbits," Marcus said. "What kind of orc?" "Female, exiled, considered dangerous." Marcus shook his head. "Haven't seen any orcs, dangerous or otherwise. Been pretty quiet up here." The ranger looked skeptical. "Mind if we search your property?" "Got a warrant. We can get one." "Then get one. Until then, this is private property. You are welcome to search the surrounding forest all you want, but the cabin's mine." The rangers exchanged glances. The lead one looked like he wanted to push harder, but Marcus stood his ground. Calm, reasonable, but absolutely firm. "We'll be back," the ranger said. "I'll be here," Marcus replied. The rangers left. Their trucks disappeared down the forest road. Marcus waited 5 minutes, then 10, making sure they were really gone. "You can come down now," he finally said. Raya climbed down from the cedar. Marcus didn't ask where she'd been hiding, didn't comment on her caution, just nodded once. "They'll come back," he said. "With a warrant next time." "I should go, before they do. Where into winter you'd last maybe a week. Better than getting you killed for harboring me." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. "You saved my life last month. When that tree branch fell, Could have left me. Could have walked away. You didn't. That was different. How trim. That was, Raya stopped. Couldn't find words that made sense. That was what you do when someone matters to you, Marcus finished. And you're not leaving. We'll figure something out. We always do. He walked past her into the cabin. Raya stood in the cold. Her hand moved to her wrist, felt the runes, protection, strength, honor. Maybe she'd been wrong about what those words meant. Maybe protection wasn't walls and weapons. Maybe strength wasn't fighting alone. Maybe honor wasn't dying for principles no one remembered. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just choosing to stay. Raya followed Marcus inside, closed the door. They'd figure it out. Together. Spring came to the Olympic forest the way it always did, slowly, reluctantly, like the land itself needed convincing that winter was truly over. The snow melted into mud, mud into grass, grass into wildflowers that covered the clearing like scattered jewels. The world woke up, remembered how to be alive. Raya stood outside the cabin in the pale April morning, looking at the forest she'd come to know. Every tree, every path, every sound that meant deer or rabbits or Marcus coming back from checking traps. She'd been here 6 months now, half a year since the exile, since her world ended, since a human lumberjack decided to break every rule his species had about hers. Inside, Marcus was adding to the medical supplies. Meredith had brought extra last month. Business was good. Raya's orc remedies were selling well in the logging camps in small towns. People didn't care where medicine came from when it worked, when it saved lives. Raya looked at her wrist. The bone talisman was gone. She'd removed it 3 days ago, hung it carefully on a leather cord near the cabin's window where morning light hit it just right, where her father's protection runes could still work, but from a place of choice instead of obligation. Some things you carry because you have to. Other things you set down because you're ready. The wind shifted, brought a scent Raya hadn't smelled in 6 months. Orc. Multiple orcs, moving through the forest with purpose, coming closer. She knew that scent, would know it anywhere. The particular combination of leather oil and weapon steel and the herb paste orcs used to prevent infection and minor wounds. She'd lived with that smell her entire life, until exile made it a memory. Marcus, she called quietly, not shouting. He'd hear. He was at the door in seconds. Read her posture. What is it? Orcs, 3 of them, maybe half a mile out, moving this direction. Marcus didn't ask if she was sure, didn't question orc senses, just nodded. Your brother, probably. You want to run? Raya looked at the cabin, at the garden plot they'd prepared for spring planting, at the expanded woodshed Marcus had built after his injury, at 6 months of work and sweat and slowly learning to trust again. No, she said, this is my fight, has been from the start. You don't have weapons. Raya smiled, not a happy smile, the kind of smile that showed tusks. I have something better. I have truth. Marcus went inside, came back with his rifle. Raya shook her head. Stay inside, she said. Please, let me handle this. Like hell. Marcus, you said this is your fight, fine. But you're not fighting alone. That's not how this works. Raya wanted to argue, wanted to protect him the way he'd protected her. But she saw the set of his jaw, the way he held the rifle. Not aggressive, just ready. This man who'd given up on the world had decided she was worth standing for. Stay behind me then, she said, and don't shoot unless I tell you. Yes, ma'am. They waited together. Raya could hear the orcs now, heavy footsteps, the jingle of armor, voices speaking the old tongue, getting closer. 3 orcs emerged from the tree line, war party configuration, weapons ready, but moving cautiously. This wasn't a raid, it was an execution detail. Raya recognized them all. Grom, her father's old second-in-command, scarred face, 20 years of combat experience. He'd taught her to throw her first spear. Kale young and nervous, barely 18. This was probably his first real mission, and leading them looking older somehow was Theron. Her brother stopped 10 feet from the cabin, looked at Raya, looked at Marcus standing behind her with the rifle. Something flickered across Theron's face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Found you, Theron said. Not to Raya, to the other 2 orcs. like she wasn't even worth addressing directly. "Brother," Raya said. Her voice was steady, colder than the winter they'd just survived. "Not your brother anymore," Theron replied. "You're exiled, dead to the clan. I'm just here to make it official." "You're here to kill me." "Orders from Chief Kragar. Can't have exiles living comfortably while the clan suffers. Sets a bad precedent." Grom shifted uncomfortably. He didn't look happy about this. Kale looked terrified. Only Theron seemed certain. But that certainty felt fragile, like armor with cracks showing. Marcus stepped forward. Not aggressive, just visible. "She's not with the clan," he said quietly. "Not your territory, not your business." Theron finally looked at him, the way you might look at an insect, mildly annoying but easily crushed. "A human," Theron said, "defending an orc traitor. That's almost poetic." He drew his weapon, a long blade that Raya recognized. It had been their father's. Theron had claimed it after the exile, said he deserved it more than a traitor daughter. "You can both die," Theron said. "Or just her, your choice human." Raya held up her hand, stopped Marcus before he could respond. This was her fight, her truth to speak. "Before you do anything," Raya said, "answer one question, Theron. Where were you 3 nights before the ambush?" Theron's hand tightened on their father's blade. "What?" Simple question. 3 nights before 32 warriors died. "Where were you when with the clan, same as always?" "No," Raya stepped forward. "You were at the border. I saw you. Didn't understand it at the time, but I've had 6 months to think about it, to remember details." Theron's face went carefully blank. "You're making things up." "Am I?" Raya looked at Grom. "You kept the duty logs. Checked them. Theron wasn't in camp the night I released the prisoner. He came back just before dawn. Said he'd been tracking a deer that got away." Grom's scarred face showed nothing, but his eyes shifted to Theron, questioning. "And the prisoner," Raya continued, "you said you saw me with him at dawn, but I was on night watch, logged by Grom himself. The prisoner was released at midnight. You couldn't have seen me unless you were watching, unless you were there for a reason." "Enough," Theron said, but his voice had changed. The certainty was cracking. "The ambush happened on the eastern route. The prisoner I released was heading west, opposite direction. But you knew about the eastern route, didn't you? Because you're the one who told the humans where to wait." "She's lying," Theron turned to Grom and Kale. "She's desperate, making up stories." But Raya saw something in Grom's face. Recognition. The old warrior was putting pieces together, remembering inconsistencies he'd ignored before. "Who benefits from 32 dead orcs and me exiled?" Raya asked, not shouting, just stating facts. "Who got promoted to second commander? Who wears father's blade now? Who stands at Chief Kragar's right hand? I earned that position by killing your own warriors, by selling them to humans for gold and glory." Theron's face twisted, anger and guilt and something darker. "You don't know anything. I know you saw me release that boy. I know you saw mercy and called it treason. I know you took that moment and built a lie around it, fed it to the chief, used it to climb over bodies, your own people's bodies." "They were weak," Theron's voice cracked. "All pretense gone now. Father's generation was weak, making treaties, showing mercy. Where did it get them? Where did it get him? A human arrow through the throat because he trusted the wrong people." Raya felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, something else, the last thread connecting her to the brother she'd known. "So you became what killed him." "Kill him," she said quietly. "Became someone who trades lives for power, who betrays his own blood for advancement. Is that what Father would have wanted? Father wanted me to be strong. Father wanted you to have honor." Raya stepped closer, unarmed, unafraid. "The blade you carry, do you even remember the runes he carved on it? Protection, strength, honor, 3 things that work together. You took the blade but forgot the meaning." Theron looked at the sword in his hand, at the runes their father had carved into the steel. His hand was shaking. Grom spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "Tell me she's lying, boy. Tell me you didn't sell our warriors to humans." Theron's voice failed. "Tell me," Grom roared. "I didn't mean for them to die." Theron's face crumpled. "I just wanted to prove I was worthy, just wanted one victory. One moment where I wasn't living in her shadow, the humans said it would be a small raid. Supply theft. No killing. They lied. The clearing went silent. Even the birds stopped singing. Kale took a step back from Theron, horror on his young face. Grom's hand went to his weapon. Not to attack Raya, to draw on Theron. "You're the traitor," Grom said, each word heavy as stone. "You killed Drukhon, Gorath, Malthus, 32 warriors, your brothers in arms." "I didn't." "You sold them," Grom drew his blade. "The penalty for treason is death. Chief Kragar's orders." Theron raised his sword, ready to fight or die or both. Grom advanced. This was going to end in blood, one way or another. Raya moved. She stepped between them, unarmed, vulnerable, facing Grom's blade. "No," she said. Everyone froze. Grom stared at her. "He's a traitor, by your own testimony." "He is, and his crimes are mine to judge. You're exiled. You have no authority. I have the authority of the betrayed, the authority of someone who lost everything because of his lies. If anyone gets to decide what happens to Theron, it's me." Grom studied her face, looking for something. After a long moment, he lowered his blade. Not sheathed, just lowered. "What would you do?" Raya turned to face her brother. Theron looked smaller somehow. The armor, the promotion pins, the stolen blade, all of it just costume now. Underneath was a scared man who'd made terrible choices and had to live with them. "I could kill you," Raya said. "Take back Father's the blade. Make you pay for every life you cost, for every day of exile, for every moment of suffering." Theron said nothing, just waited for judgment. "But I won't," Raya continued. "Not because you deserve mercy, you don't, but because I'm not you. I won't add another body to the pile. Won't continue the cycle of revenge that destroyed our family." She stepped closer, so close she could see the tears on Theron's face. "You took my honor, my home, my clan. You can't take who I choose to be." She turned to Grom and Kael. "Return to Chief Kragar. Tell him the exile Raya is dead, died in the wilderness. No body to recover. Let him believe the exile worked. Let him think justice was served. And what of him?" Grom nodded at Theron. "Tell Kragar that Theron completed his mission, that he killed me himself. Let him keep his position, his reputation. Father's blade." Raya looked at Theron. "Let him live with the knowledge of what he is. That's punishment enough." "You can't," Theron started. "I can, because unlike you, I understand what Father's runes meant. Protection isn't about walls and weapons. It's about choosing what to protect. Strength isn't about power over others. It's about having power and choosing mercy. And honor." She touched the empty place on her wrist. "Honor is doing the right thing when no one's watching, when it costs you everything." She turned her back on Theron, walked to where Marcus stood. Grom looked between them, at Rhea, at Theron, at the impossible situation they'd created. Finally, he sheathed his blade. "As you wish," he said. Raya, not to Theron, giving her the respect of a warrior even though she was exiled. "But if we meet again." "You won't," Raya said. "I'm dead, remember?" Grom nodded once, sharp, military. Then he turned to Kael. "Come, we have a report to deliver." They started to walk away. Theron stood frozen, lost, holding their father's blade like he'd forgotten what it was for. "Theron," Raya called. He turned, hope and fear mixing on his face. "Take care of the blade. It deserves better than both of us." Theron's face crumpled. He opened his mouth. No words came. Finally, he just nodded, turned, followed Grom and Kyle into the forest. Raya watched them go, watched her brother disappear, watched her old life walk away for the last time. Marcus came to stand beside her. "You okay? Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." They went inside, closed the door. Raya sat by the fire, felt 6 months of tension drain out of her body all at once. She started shaking, not from fear, from release, from the weight of a choice that changed everything. Marcus made tea, handed her a cup, sat in his chair, didn't ask questions, just existed in the same space, gave her room to process. "Thank you," Raya finally said. "For what?" "For standing with me, for being willing to fight." Marcus looked at her over his tea. You would have done the same for me. Yes, she would have, without question. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, spring continued its slow work. Inside, something had shifted. Something had been settled. Raya looked at the wooden bird on the shelf, at the deer beside it, at the cabin that had become more home than any orc settlement ever was. 1 year. 365 days since Chief Kragar passed judgment in 17 minutes. October had returned. The forest wore its fire colors again. But this October felt different, full of possibility instead of death. Raya stood in front of the cabin, not the same cabin Marcus had carried her to 12 months ago. This cabin had grown, expanded. A second room added to the eastern side. Marcus had drawn the plans. Raya had done most of the building. Orc strength combined with human engineering. The walls were straight, the roof didn't leak. It was good work, honest work. The garden had flourished over summer, potatoes and carrots and herbs, some human varieties, some orc, all growing together in the same soil. Meredith had laughed when she saw it, called it the most confused garden in Washington. But the vegetables didn't care about politics. They just grew. Raya heard the cart before she saw it, Meredith's monthly delivery. But this time there was an extra passenger, a young woman, 19 at most, pregnant, maybe 5 months along. She climbed down from the cart with the careful movements of someone carrying precious cargo. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands shook as she gripped a small bag. Everything she owned, probably. Meredith came around the cart, looked at Raya. This is Rowan, her family. They didn't react well to certain news. Raya understood without asking. The baby's father was orc, or the girl had simply chosen wrong in her family's eyes. Either way, she was here, alone, scared, looking for something that might not exist. Rowan looked at Raya, at the green skin, the tusks, the clear evidence of what she was. The girl's hands went protectively to her belly. Is it true? Rowan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Is there really a place where people like me can stay? Raya looked at Marcus. He stood in the doorway, gave her the smallest nod. Your call, your choice. Raya turned back to Rowan. Depends. Can you work? I can cook, sew, clean. I can. Good. Winter's coming. We need extra hands. Raya gestured to the cabin. We don't have much, but we share what we have. You work, you eat, you stay safe. That's the deal. Rowan's eyes filled with tears. I don't have money. I can't pay. Didn't ask for money. Asked if you can work. Yes, I can work. I'll work hard, I promise. Meredith helped Rowan with her bag, showed her inside, left Raya and Marcus standing in the October afternoon. We're starting something, Marcus said quietly. You know that right word's going to spread. Others will come. Exiles, outcasts, people who don't fit anywhere else. I know. Could get complicated. Already is complicated, Marcus smiled. Fair point. He looked at the expanded cabin, at the garden, at the future taking shape around them. Your father would be proud. You know that? Raya looked at the window where the bone talisman hung. The protection runes caught the afternoon light. Maybe, she said. I hope so. Inside, she could hear Meredith explaining how things worked. Where to sleep, when meals happen, the routines they'd established. Rowan's voice asking questions. Grateful, hopeful, alive. Raya thought about the trial, about 17 minutes that were supposed to end her life, about exile that was supposed to be death, about a human who chose mercy when the world demanded violence. She'd lost everything. Clan, honor, home, all the things she thought defined her. But she'd found something else, something better, not given, not inherited, built, with her own hands, her own choices. They called this place the Sanctuary now. 3 humans, 1 orc, soon a half-breed child. They weren't a clan, weren't a village. They were something new, something that shouldn't exist according to every law and tradition and generation of hatred. But here they were, existing anyway. Raya walked the perimeter one more time, checking the fence Marcus had helped her build, looking for damage, for weak points, old habits from a lifetime of defending positions. But this position was different. This wasn't about holding ground against enemies. It was about maintaining space for the people who had nowhere else to go. She heard footsteps behind her. Rowan. The girl walked carefully, one hand on her belly, one hand steadying herself against the fence. "It's beautiful here," Rowan said. "Peaceful." "It is now," Raya replied. "Wasn't always. Meredith told me about your exile, about what your brother did." Raya waited, wondering where this was going. "She said you chose to let him live, that you could have killed him but didn't." "I didn't forgive him," Raya corrected. "I just chose not to let his choices define mine. There's a difference." Rowan nodded, quiet for a moment. "My father wanted me to get rid of the baby, said it was an abomination, said I was dead to the family if I kept it. But you kept it anyway. Couldn't do anything else. This baby, it's mine. Part of me. Doesn't matter who the father is or what people think. It's mine to protect." Raya looked at the girl, saw strength hiding under the fear, saw determination wearing the mask of uncertainty. "You'll be safe here," Raya said. "The baby too. That's a promise." "Why?" Rowan asked. "Why help me? I'm nobody. Just another human who made a mistake." "Because someone helped me when I was nobody. When I was dying in a forest with nothing left to lose. And that choice changed everything." She gestured to the cabin, to the sanctuary growing around them. "We help because that's who we choose to be." Rowan wiped her eyes, nodded, went back inside. Raya stood alone in the October afternoon. The forest around her was quiet, not the threatening quiet of winter, the peaceful quiet of things settling, of finding balance. Marcus came out, handed her something, a carved wooden figure, new, fresh shavings still clinging to it, two figures standing side by side, one human, one orc. Between them a small third figure, a child. "For the shelf," Marcus said. Seemed appropriate. Raya held the carving carefully, looked at the detail, the care, the hope carved into wood. "Thank you," she said. "We're going to need a bigger shelf soon, if others keep coming. Then we'll build a bigger shelf, and a bigger cabin. We'll build that too." They stood together, watching the sun start its descent, the forest turning gold with autumn light. A year ago, Raya was dying. Tonight, she was helping build something that would outlive them all. Raya placed Marcus's new carving on the shelf, next to the bird she'd made, next to his deer, next to all the small wooden pieces of their growing collection. "Come on," Marcus said. "Dinner won't cook itself, and I think Meredith brought actual coffee this time. Real coffee or the terrible substitute. She claims it's real, but she claimed that last time too." They went inside, to warmth and light and the sounds of people existing together. Rowan was helping with dinner. Meredith was telling a story about a troublesome customer. Everything was ordinary and miraculous. The door closed. The forest grew quiet. Night came softly to the sanctuary in the woods, and in that cabin, something continued. Not the grand change the world needed, just the small change it could handle. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time, building something new from the ruins of what was lost. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And sometimes that's enough.